Well, now let's take a closer look at what's really going on in the electric car market and beyond. Bringing in Aaron Cole live from Denver now. Aaron is a managing editor of Internet Brands Automotive Group. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rachelle.
So looking at the auto show, which cars or products really creating the most buzz this year in Frankfurt?
Well, there was a lot of buzz in Frankfurt, especially over, all the EVs. But I think Volkswagen and the Volkswagen Group as a whole really generated a lot of buzz. Volkswagen rolled out their affordable, small ID.3 model that'll go on sale in Europe. And then Porsche, which is also part of the Volkswagen Group, rolled out its Taycan. And that was the first auto show debut of that. And that's a really exclusive very sports, performance-centric model. And then Audi had a couple of concepts, EV concepts specifically, that they rolled out at the show. So, Volkswagen Group really went all in on EVs this year.
Now, some car companies like Toyota and Fiat Chrysler either scaled back on the show or skipped it altogether. What should we read into that?
Well, I think when you look at Toyota and Fiat Chrysler, two things happen there. Is one, as Frankfurt is a huge show and it's a massive draw for the public. The displays cost millions of euros in themselves, and that's a significant amount of cost to incur if there's not a whole lot to show there. And second, I think there are concerns about the global auto market cooling, especially in Europe and China. And so automakers, big global automakers like Fiat Chrysler and Toyota may have just wanted to sit on the sidelines for this year just to wait and see what the economies in Europe and China do.
And you mentioned some of the costs. So are these shows still worth the effort, given that there are now so many other ways to really connect with consumers?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head there. There's social media that automakers can really control the message and control the climate outside of auto shows. So a lot of times they'll unveil new models, like the Taycan, for instance, was unveiled simultaneously in North America, Europe, and China just about a week before the Frankfurt show. So the days of unveiling a new surprise model at the auto show may be behind us, but really what auto shows are meant to do, and their best use is to bring the public in. And Frankfurt is a huge public draw. North America has some big public shows. China has some big public shows. So kind of controlling the news and dominating the news at the auto show, those days might be behind us a little bit.
Now, as you mentioned, there's this huge focus on clean energy cars. But in terms of marketability, consumers don't seem to be getting on board that quickly. How do you see that dichotomy affecting the success of EVs and, in turn, car companies?
Well, that's a great question. Right now, car companies are trying to hedge their bets as best that they can by not going all in together. There are battery alliances. Ford and Volkswagen, for instance, are teaming up together on small electric cars for worldwide, not necessarily in North America. So they're trying to use economy of scale with each other to kind of amortize those costs for electrification. The other thing is you're right. Globally, there's EV sales are less than 5%. So we're still talking about a very small marketplace. But if regulations are any kind of indicator, there's a lot to gain from that. And you can't sit on the sidelines and wait for electrification to happen on its own.
So then, with that being said, how much do these shows reflect what consumers actually want versus innovation that car makers really want to push forward and explore?
Well, what consumers are obviously buying right now is bigger cars because fuel prices are relatively low. But we know from even just recent history that the minute that the fuel prices hit a critical point, and in the United States that could be $4 or $5 a gallon, then that mentality switches. The other thing to consider is as more EV makers get into the game, those costs for batteries and electric motors will eventually hit a point where electric cars will be on par with gas-powered cars, and when that happens, even on really a really expensive grid, EVs are more efficient and less to run. So I think we're getting close to that tipping point, but who's to say?
And just quickly, you mentioned the slowdown that we're seeing with electric vehicles and really a general slowdown in terms of the global market. And you also have now this disrupted supply chains from the trade tensions and regulators really cracking down on emissions. So how are these companies responding to these pressures?
Well, we see it in a lot of different ways, but one thing that we do see is that, you know, the timeline for development for most of these cars is 5 to 7 years out. And so most of the automakers, global automakers, are all in, regardless of, you know, trade tensions or whatever. They can isolate themselves with localized manufacturing, which they already do in North America, Europe, China, and they've done that to a certain extent. They did that more so for kind of insulating themselves from currency fluctuations, but really the timeline really hasn't changed. I think what automakers are looking for right now, especially from different governments, U.S., China, they're looking for stability in regulations, and over the long term, I think the stability is there. The direction is already cut.
Aaron Cole, Managing Editor of Internet Brands Automotive Group. Thank you so much.